Hey, friends, welcome to the Connected Mom podcast, where we really enjoy having real conversations that will help you to connect more deeply with God, more empathetically with your fellow moms, and more intentionally with your child. I am Becky Harling, your host, and I'm really excited about our conversation today because, as you may or may not know, I am passionate about having good friends. And I believe that as you're raising your kids, and even when your kids are adults, you need deep friendships in the journey with you. Because let's face it, parenting is hard. A mom said to me just yesterday, today I'm kind of ready to quit parenting. And, I thought to myself, yeah, we've all been there, right? And no matter where you are on this parenting journey, there are moments where you're like, man, this is hard. I feel like quitting. But the thing is, you can't quit because it goes on for a lifetime. And this is why we need good friends in the journey with us. And so Kristen Strong is our guest today, and she's the author of 6 books. And right now she is traveling and speaking on loneliness and friendships and how important that is. And, that is a topic near and dear to my heart because I released my own book in September on cultivating deeper connections in a lonely world. Her newest book is called Desperate Woman Seeks Friends. And I love that title, Kristen. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Becky. I'm just so happy to be here with you.
Well, we are happy to have you with us. So first of all, tell us about your family. You are married to a U.S. Air Force veteran, correct?
Correct. Yes. We got married almost 30 years ago in 1995. and
Year.
It's a good year. And so, yeah, we got married in the 1900s. and It was quite the change, marrying into the Air Force life, which meant constant change. I grew up on, my maiden name is O'Neill, and I grew up on O'Neill Lane, like that's the name of it, because everybody on O'Neill Lane's last name was O'Neill. So I grew up with family, with familiarity. And so when I met my husband in college, we fell in love. He'd been on the enlisted side of the Air Force house. He was transitioning through ROTC to the officer's side of the house. So we got married and began that journey. And it was really a baptism by fire education in how to make friends, because I realized I didn't know how to make friends at that time. But we do have 3 children. We have twin sons who are 25. We have a daughter who's 21, almost 22. And though he retired from the Air Force 10 years ago. And so we've lived in Colorado Springs ever since then.
Seriously, like I live in Colorado Springs. How did I not know this? The Air Force is right out my back window. We'll have to do coffee. Anyway, tell me about your twin sons because I happen to have identical twin grandsons who turn 5 tomorrow. And the twin thing is a whole thing, right?
It is a whole thing. God bless her. She is busy. If they are,
she's number 4 and 5.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I had him first, which I felt like was a lot easier because I didn't know, any different. So, having a couple of older kids and then twins, that's rough. But yeah, my twin boys. One of them lives in Colorado, or it lives in Fort Collins, in Colorado. The other one lives he lives very far away with his job. So, but he's here for some training, so that's fun. And so we'll get to see him soon, which will be great.
Were they identical or fraternal?
They were fraternal. Yes, very fraternal. One's a blonde, and one's a brunette. So
okay, ours are identical. And so it is just a whole thing. I mean, they had the whole twin language. I could go on and on about that, but we are here to talk about friendships. So I'll try to get on topic now. So yeah, I do. I have the Air Force Academy right out my back window. And Colorado Springs is a big military town.
Yeah, well, my husband works at the Air Force Academy on the civilian side of the fence, but what brought us here was he was assigned there to teach in the physics department, actually. So
okay. So living in the life in the military, you moved a lot, right?
We did. I did. We didn't move. I would say we didn't move as much as a lot of folks do, but we moved a lot. And my husband got a couple assignments in before I came around, but we still moved a lot. And certainly compared to my childhood, it was a lot where we never moved. So
Right, right. Your childhood, it sounds like, was very secure, very stable. Everybody on your street is named O'Neill.
yes, it was very. It was just like a lot of family. So I did feel a sense of security because of how large my family was. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, tell us a little bit about your journey to find friends, because your title is about desperation to find friends. So tell us your journey.
Well, yeah. So that title, it's "Desperate Woman Seeks Friends." That comes from a story when we lived in Dayton, Ohio, the second time we were there, and the second time we were stationed there was very different from the first. I didn't get to like, I didn't have those same friendships weren't really there the second time. So I just remember telling my husband, like, I was trying all the right things, quote unquote, to make friends. I could not, I felt like I couldn't pay somebody to be my friend. Everybody just had their friends, like they weren't looking for new friends. And so I told my husband I was going to make a sign and hold it in our front yard. Of course, this is 2005, before social media. I was going to hold it in my front yard that said, "Desperate Woman Seeks Friends," and just see if I'd get any takers, from that. So that's where the
Great
title
plan.
comes. Yes, but I would say, so when I was a brand new military wife, I went off. We moved from Oklahoma to Ohio, which I acted like we were moving to the moon. It wasn't
Well,
quite
it
that
kind
bad.
of is culturally very different.
100% culturally very different. And so I realized, though, like, I did not know how to make friends. Like, I just expected the friends or people to know I was new because I transferred colleges as a senior, but and so I just expected people to know I was new and to do the work to come up to me and initiate some sort of conversation that would turn into a friendship. And that is just not the way it works. You have to be the one to put yourself out there. And now, not that other people don't, sometimes you just hit the jackpot and somebody will initiate that invitation to you to something that could lead to a friendship. But by and large, in the beginning, you got to put more effort in there than you're necessarily feeling like you're making a return on. And so that was a real thing I had to learn. There's an art and a skill to making friends. And we don't see it that way, though. We see it as, well, people just do it, like they have it and I don't have it. So something must be wrong with me. No, it's probably nothing is wrong with you. It's just hard because it's hard. And it just takes effort and time and perseverance. And I had to learn that.
Yeah, I often hear people that will switch churches and they'll say, nobody reached out to me, or I couldn't find community, or I couldn't make friends. The problem is we do have to take initiative, right? I mean, people aren't, like you said, they're not going to just knock on your door and say, "Hey, I want to be your friend." And do you think we've lost our ability at some basic people skills through the years?
Yes, I do think so. I think one of the casualties of smartphones is we're losing our interpersonal skills because we kind of get this low level. I liken it to, like, we eat all day on breadcrumbs of connection versus like sitting down to a meal, which is what face to face time with a person is. But yeah, I think I think it does take effort. I mean, listen, it's not, if we lived in Harry Potter world, people would just drop on our front porch and, we could just like apparate like they did in the book and we could just make friends. That's not how it works. Now, having said that, though, like, I was talking with a good friend of mine who just moved to Colorado Springs, and she's military, and she was telling me she's a new person, but she extended an invite to three different people to have coffee. And all three people said no, they don't have time. And I
Oh,
thought, okay,
wow.
that's ridiculous too, because listen, I get you're busy, but you can, listen, we never know when the Lord, we're never done finding our people. We never know if the Lord's going to do a new thing. And so if you're busy now, absolutely understand that. But then you can say, I know this is a long way down the road, but can we schedule it in 3 months, in 6 months? Like, let's get a date on the calendar, even if I can't do it right now. So we do have to put ourselves out there, but also other people who are the established people, like me in Colorado Springs as a resident here for 15 years now. I need to not close my heart off to meeting a new friend either.
Right. So you touched on two important issues in that conversation right there, Kristen. The first one is busyness, because it's my conviction after the research I've done, it is that busyness is one of the key contributing factors to loneliness right now. Because as a culture over the last 100 years, we've become busier and busier and busier, and we need to do all the things. I use the illustration of my grandmother years ago, staying with her in the summertime, and every afternoon at 3 o'clock she had her best friend over for coffee. And I think about that now, and I think, who has time for that? Right, we're in and out of our driveways, we're on to the next appointment or whatever. And so we have to slow down a little bit in order to cultivate the friendships that we're looking for. But you also brought up another interesting point in, I want to call it clicks, right? So you've been a resident of Colorado Springs for 15 years. And, sometimes we get so comfortable in our, maybe we have one or two really close friends, and we just don't want to be open to other friends. Talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, listen, we all have limited bandwidth. We cannot all be friends with everybody. I mean, that is an absolute fact. We have children to feed, spouses to encourage our relationship with, or significant others. If you're not married, you have family members, that you're in relationship with. You have a life to live. You have jobs, etc. Um, but but we cannot become so set in our ways that we close our hearts off to potential new relationships. Because I think about when I have one of my really good friends now. Her name is Maria, and she moved here in 2018. And when we met and connected, I wasn't really looking for a new friend. I felt like I had like I was kind of okay there, but I also wasn't opposed to a new friend. And so we met. We went out to coffee one time, and we just immediately hit it off. And now she is one of like my dearest people. And I think, God, what I would have missed out on if I would have been like, friendly to her, but not encouraged friendship with her. I think I just think it's important to be mindful of and I guess that just comes with also a relationship with the Holy Spirit. Is he asking me to give a little more here? Okay, even if I'm busy, but I'm going to get so much more back. And that's what, you have to just kind of believe in faith will happen. And on the busy component, in my research, I learned, you may have learned this too, Becky, that like if you are a parent today of younger children, we're spending twice as much time with our kids than generations ago. And I think that manifests in, all kinds of activities, we're running them around and all the things. And while some of that is okay, certainly, like it's great for your kids to do things, that if our time is a pie, there's a bigger piece of it going to our kids. And I think because of it, we're back burnering friendship. We're just considering it like, something that's just not a priority. And I think in God's mind, it is a priority because Jesus walked this earth with friends and he was perfect. And if he did life with friends, then we need to do the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think particularly in the motherhood journey, I mean, some of my dearest friends, I think of one in particular, we became friends like more than 30 years ago when our kids were little. We're still friends. We're still praying over our kids and now our grandkids. And You need people in the journey with you because parenting is hard. So let's talk a little bit. One of the things you talk about in the book are awkward moments, and I love that. So, what I want to do, Kristen, is can you share with us a story where you had an awkward moment and how you can laugh about it now? Because I think people think of awkward moments as they're the end of the world, right? And now I'm embarrassed. Nobody's going to like me or want to hang out with me. All the stuff that goes on in our. We all have awkward moments.
Right. Yeah. I've definitely had some awkward ones. I know my friend Holly Girth says awkward is the price of admission for connection. And so I just feel like
Holly, by the way.
I know, she's so smart. But it's true. Like, it's just sort of what you got to go through to get to the good stuff. But I tell a few awkward stories in the book, but I guess the one that comes to mind right now is when I when we visited our current church we were at. We tried several in Colorado Springs before we really settled on one. And so we visited this church. We go to the church service, and then we go visit the community, like the what I call Sunday school, but it's community hour. and and so I saw a girl there who I knew looked familiar, but I couldn't place her. I asked my husband, "Do you know where we've seen her before?" He couldn't place her either. And so it was one of those things where we visited that class over the next month or two. We kept going, but until we decided to commit to that church. And I kept seeing her going like, "God, I know her, but I don't know where." And it was a big class. So our paths just never crossed during it. And we were talking with other people during that course of time. But anyway, when at some point after we'd committed to going to that church, they were doing small groups. This girl that I kept thinking I knew, and her husband ended up being in the same small group as us. And so when we met the first time and the leader had us go around to introduce ourselves, my friend said her name. And right as she got the name out of this huge class of 100 people or so, I just holler, "You're a May, you're friends with the Hudgens. I know you." Like I pound the table, like and she's like startled, like she didn't even want. She was like, "Yeah," like she was like, "Do I want to admit that I am who she?" Because
Yes, yes.
this girl's a lot right now. Anyway, like the whole class went quiet, and so it was just like, but I had like this lightning bolt, and it just came out of my mouth, right then and there. And anyway, Amay is like my best friend now. We just get along like a house of fire, and I think often those awkward beginnings help feed the good connection, and they don't detract from it because they just give you a great story.
Yeah, they do give you a great story. And I think we have to learn to laugh at ourselves, right? I mean, there are always going to be awkward moments, or where you're going to say things and walk away from a conversation like, wow, that was really awkward. What in the world was coming out of my mouth? And at those times, you just kind of have to laugh at yourself. I think keeping a sense of humor is important for friendship. So, why do you think it's so hard for people to make good friends?
Well, I think a little bit of what we talked about is, putting the time into it. Like anything of value in this world, it just takes good old work. And so now, you get a lot out of it, but you've got to certainly in the beginning put a lot of work into it. And in my research, I learned, if you just want a casual friend, it takes 50 hours of time together. But if you want a real good, true blue, deep friend, it takes 200 to 300 hours of time
Oh, I
together.
love that you brought that out. That is so profound.
Yeah, and so like if you got to put in the hours, you know what I mean? So
Yeah, yeah.
listen, but like I could be with a May or Maria or another friend, and we could talk for 3 hours, and it goes by like that. But you have to, in the beginning, do that work to foster those friendships, getting together, and however that best works for you, in order to just be able to make that connection.
Okay, and it followed on that question. You talk in the book about fertilizer seasons. Tell us, what do you mean by that? I'm visualizing manure.
And I know, and I do talk about manure in the book.
There you
So
go.
so there's
So
that.
make the connection for us, please.
Listen, I was raised surrounded by dairy farms, so we, the manure made an impression, I guess. But so, so what I do, I share a story about my daughter, how she just had a very hard time making friends in high school. Um, I don't know that I guess I wouldn't say she was afflicted by quote unquote mean girls, but she did have girls who did things that were just real mean, and she could not. And I know maybe I'm just arguing semantics, but it was just a lot of, oh yeah, we'll get together on this day. And then that day would come and they would flake out. Or, the friends were hot and cold. They would act not interested in her. And so she would try to develop some friendships with other people. And then these friends would come to her and say, well, look at you acting like you're too good for us. It was
Oh my
really,
word. Girls
just
can be mean. I mean, they really can. And that's not helping our friendships.
no, girl drama. So anyway, she ended up like having most of her friends through her tennis club, not associated with school, but she made it through school. She graduated great. So she goes to college. She goes to Texas A&M, and she made friends left, right, and center. But she put herself out there still. She didn't stay in the dorm room just to, and kind of wait for people to knock on her door. She got out there, but she learned how to do that in part because of that rough high school season. I think if friends had just always been there, like they were for me as a new married, she would have gone to college and had a harder time. And so when we were she was home over her first Christmas break over her freshman year. And we were just sitting on the sofa, her, my husband, and I, talking about kind of how college the first semester had just been so good for her. And I made a comment about, I think I actually said, you dealt with a lot of crap in high school, but I feel like it's serving you well now. And my husband basically said, yeah, like the you made a lot of fertilizer basically, and that fertilizer you got in your high school years is what's feeding your friendships now. And so that is, in God's hands, even gross stuff can be good stuff.
Yeah, it can be turned around. So, what are some of the skills you talk about putting yourself out there? But let's dial down a little and get really practical. What are some really practical skills? Like maybe some mom is listening to this and she's like, "Okay, I've been hiding at home in my yoga pants because I can't get my kid potty trained, or I have been just my house is a wreck and I don't have the time or energy to make friends, or my kids are in so many sports and activities that I'm in the car all day long." So, what are some of the basic skills that moms can start with to cultivate those friendships?
I would say for the little kids, especially, um, especially when, yeah, you feel like you're at home all the time. It, it's great to kind of remember three things. Well, these three things you can remember no matter your stage of life. But I'll show how I put them into practice with young kids. So I like to say, when you're wanting to make friends, putting yourself out there looks like showing up, opening up, and praying up. And so showing up is number one. I'll tell you what, anytime we moved to a new town, I would seek out the Barnes and Noble story time or the library story time, and something that was good for the kids, but would get me out that with their parents too, with the other moms. One good friend I finally made, we just kept showing up at the park together after nap time at the same time with our young daughters. And so we formed a friendship. We're still friends today, even though we haven't lived in the same town since 2007. So that was a friendship formed that way too. But showing up where other women are would be my first thing. And I get that it's hard. And listen, the potty training season, I get that. You kind of gotta, you're sort of chained to the house when that's happening. Thankfully, it doesn't take forever though. They will get potty trained. No, no. So I'd say if you are in the potty training season, the other thing is opening up your house. There is something about when you invite somebody over, inviting them into your house is inviting them into your heart. And I will say that certainly, I've never had, well, I should say, not every person I've invited to my house has become a heart friend, but every heart friend of mine has been to my house. So, there's something about that. And nobody cares if your house is clean. They would like to, if they have to go to the bathroom, make the toilet clean. But, that's, a super clean house just looks like a museum in many ways. And nobody's can relax in a museum. I mean, with young kids, that's probably not a problem anyway. But my point being is that nobody cares about your mess. They just are excited that you invited them over and they got something to do that day with their kids. So, if they have young children as well. So yeah, like inviting them over, even at lunchtime, throw a few chicken nuggets, some apple slices, and they can have lunch. The kids can, while you adults talk. They can play in the backyard while you adults talk. And nobody, if they're potty training, then you're at home to like deal with that. Because again, most women are going to understand that issue. Certainly if they have kids, but I'm willing to bet even if they don't. So open up, show up, and then pray up. I think is always the right thing to do is like I mentioned earlier, if Jesus had friends, it is God's will for you to have friends. So praying to that end is going to yield fruit. Now, I know some women out there may be saying, well, that's probably true for other people, but I don't think that's true for me. And I'd say, no, it is true for you too. And so, be diligent to just keep going to the Lord with your heart's desire. Ask Him to open your eyes to whom you could extend an invite to, somebody you meet along the way. An interesting thing about the military is, we're kind of quick at the small talk. It's quick. It's right to like you have to be. And I've said more than once, "Hi, my name is Kristen. What are you doing for Thanksgiving?" So don't be afraid to do that because it might feel awkward in the beginning, but the more you do that, the less awkward it feels.
Yeah. And going back to prayer again, especially I mean, you're all moms that are listening. You need to find one or two friends who are willing to pray with you over your kids. And some of my deepest friendships have been because we prayed together for our kids, through the rough battles, through the easy times. But I mean, so that is a great way to connect. Okay, in the book, you talk about boundaries, and I love that because it's one of my favorite topics. And, I feel like we're kindred spirits here, Kristen, because some of these topics are in my book as well. Talk to us a little bit about boundaries, because if you don't have good boundaries, you really can't have good friends.
No, you can't. That's true. Well, I do talk in the book, yeah, how boundaries are our friends, and about how there are only so many hours in the day, and there are so like we talked about earlier, you cannot be friends with everybody. You have to have your boundaries over your time, and that's great. But also you want to have boundaries in what you accept from how people treat you. And so if you are getting this idea that, if you're this has been sort of a pattern where you notice somebody is just, you're feeling consistently more and more badly after you hang out with them than you did when you got together. That may be a friend that needs a wider boundary between you and her. And not to say that that doesn't happen without a conversation if necessary, but just because we were friends with somebody at one point in our life doesn't mean we're supposed to be friends with them forever and ever. Amen. I don't remember who said it originally, but there's the expression, you're friends for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And so not everybody's a lifetime friend. So don't be afraid to put up those boundaries there. But also, if boundaries are our friends, they're also our friends' friends. so,
Yes.
so if somebody, I remember a friendship where I felt like we were kind of like I really enjoyed her and I thought we were really moving towards like being a close friend. And then all of a sudden she kind of put the brakes on that. And this was one of those times, and it wasn't like a cruel, like just a ghosting kind of thing. It wasn't like that at all. It was just, she started taking longer to answer texts. She started to, it just, the signs were there where I'm like, oh, okay, I think this friendship is just not meant to be. And it ended up, after just considering it with prayer and, talking to God about it, I never sensed like I had done anything wrong or she had done anything wrong. There was no dramatic fallout. It was just, I was outside her bandwidth, life had changed for her and she just did not have time for every relationship that she used to have time for. And so I had to just accept that there was a boundary there and I was on the outside of it. But that was, that was okay. If that happens, for whatever reason, that relationship was just not God's best for me moving forward.
Yeah, and I think, one time years ago somebody wisely said boundaries make good neighbors. It's like the invisible fence around your property, right? And so we have to understand how that plays out in friendships, even as far as like I think little things like giving each other advice. Sometimes your friends maybe just want a listening ear and they want empathy and they don't want you to tell them how to fix their kids. And I think that that's particularly applicable to those of us that have adult kids, right? Where moms, we've been through the ringer and it's so easy to dive in with how you can fix it for a younger mom, but they're not looking for that. And one way to be a good friend is to really work on your listening skills and your empathy skills and shut down your fix it skills because usually people don't want to be fixed, right?
Oh, that's so good. Yeah, 100% agree. They just want to be heard. And then, often I think people will give you that signal if they would like your advice on something, or you can say, do you want to hear more, about what I think here, or, are we good as it is, but yeah, I agree. Especially us older moms who have, there's no mother that has adult kids. It's not been through the ringer, I don't think, but but
If
um,
you've never been through the ringer, we might want to talk to you.
yeah, I know. Yeah, and there's so many awesome blessings about adult kids, but it's a thing. It's a whole thing. So yeah, we want to make sure that we are being respectful of boundaries with our younger moms and not deflating them. I always hated to hear when I was a younger mom, like, oh, just wait till the teenage years. And
Yeah, that's not encouraging.
that's not encouraging. Yeah. And it's also not encouraging either when I remember being at the grocery store many a time and a little old lady would come up to me and say, like when my kids were really little, oh, just enjoy it because, it goes by so fast. Well, during those years, it does not feel fast. It feels real slow. And so I know. So I always think like, okay, I want to be mindful about how I'm encouraging them and just say, good job, mama is probably better than, you know, trying to convince them. They're right. The little old ladies were right, but you cannot see that until you are older and past that. So
Yes, yes, yes. Well, this has been such a fun conversation, Kristen, but I want to end with where can our moms get your book, Desperate Woman Seeks Friends? Where can they get that? Where can they connect with you? How can they learn more about your ministry and what you offer?
sure. I you could get the book anywhere books are sold, wherever book Barnes and Noble, Amazon, books bookshop, wherever you like to go, Christian book. But also you can get read more about it at my website, and my website is kristenstrong.com, and my first name is Kristen strong.com. And then the social media I'm pretty much on the most is Instagram at Kristen Strong.
Okay. All right. So moms, I hope you will connect. Friendship is such an important topic. And so don't just dismiss this whole episode. If nothing else, create some space to just ask God in your prayer time, hey, Lord, how am I doing friend wise? And where do I need to invest maybe more time and effort into this important part of life so that I can live life abundantly the way you want me to live it. So I hope you enjoyed this conversation today. And I'd like to ask you to share it with your friends, because if you needed this conversation, chances are they did as well. And then if you would just like us, then you can follow us and you'll never miss another episode. So thanks for joining us today at The Connected Mom. And our prayer for you is that you feel deeply connected to God, deeply connected with some great friends, and deeply connected with your child. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.